The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, and Delilah Turner gripped the leather seat, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe as dust swirled around the wheels and settled on her worn blue traveling dress. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to Dallas, Texas, in the year 1877, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride placed by a rancher named Nathan Wells. The journey had taken weeks, and every mile had felt like both an escape and a march toward an unknown future. Through the small window, she could see the dusty main street of Dallas, bustling with people going about their business. Cowboys rode past on horseback, women in bonnets carried parcels from the mercantile, and somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil. The driver opened the door and extended his weathered hand. Delilah took it carefully, mindful of the tender spots on her back that still ached despite months of healing. She stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, squinting against the bright Texas sun that seemed so much more intense than the subdued light back east. "Miss Turner." A deep voice came from her left, and she turned to see a tall man approaching. He was broad-shouldered and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-green, like the ocean she had crossed long ago as a child. He wore dusty work clothes, leather chaps over denim trousers, and a well-worn hat that he removed as he came closer. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nathan Wells." "Yes, madam. Most folks just call me Nate." He studied her face for a moment, and she wondered what he saw. A woman of 22 with auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun, green eyes that had seen too much, and a face that probably looked more tired than pretty. "Welcome to Dallas. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was fine, thank you." The lie came easily. Everything was fine. Everything had to be fine. He gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "I have your trunk loaded already. The ranch is about an hour's ride from town. I thought we might stop at the hotel dining room first if you are hungry, give you a chance to rest a bit before we head out." The kindness in his offer nearly undid her. That would be very nice. They walked side by side down the boardwalk, and Delilah noticed how he shortened his stride to match hers. The hotel was a modest 2-story building with a painted sign that read Dallas Grand Hotel, though grand seemed an exaggeration. Still, it was clean and welcoming, with lace curtains in the windows. Inside the dining room, they took a table by the window. A waitress brought coffee and menus written on a small chalkboard. Delilah ordered soup and bread, her stomach too nervous for anything heavier. Nate ordered a steak and potatoes. "Tell me about yourself," he said after the waitress left. "Your letters were not very detailed." Delilah wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup. "There is not much to tell. I am 22. I worked as a seamstress in Philadelphia. My parents passed away several years ago. I have no other family. All true as far as it went. I am sorry about your parents. That must have been difficult." His eyes held genuine sympathy. "What made you decide to come all the way out here to marry a stranger?" She had prepared an answer for this question. "I wanted a fresh start, a new life. Philadelphia held too many memories." Also true, though not in the way he likely imagined. He nodded slowly. "I can understand that. I came to Texas for similar reasons about 5 years ago. Sometimes a person needs to leave the past behind." Their food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. Delilah found herself stealing glances at him. He had strong hands, calloused from work, and he ate with careful manners despite his rough appearance. There was a gentleness about him that surprised her. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to shift the focus away from herself. His face brightened. "It is not large, about 300 acres. I raise cattle and some horses. I have a small house, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room. I built most of it myself, so it is a bit rough around the edges, but it is solid and weatherproof. I have a few hands who help with the cattle, good men. There is a creek that runs through the property, and the land is beautiful, especially in spring when the wildflowers bloom. It sounds lovely. And it did. She had dreamed of open spaces, of a place where she could breathe freely. I hope you will think so. I know it is not fancy like what you are probably used to in Philadelphia. I was not accustomed to anything fancy, she said quickly. I lived in a boarding house and worked long hours at the dress shop. This will be very different, but I think I will like it. After they finished eating, Nate paid the bill and helped her back into the wagon. Her small trunk was secured in the back, containing everything she owned in the world. They headed out of Dallas on a well-worn dirt road that stretched toward rolling hills in the distance. The landscape was so different from what she had known. Vast and open, with scattered trees and tall grasses that rippled in the wind like waves. The sky seemed enormous, an endless blue dome overhead. She found herself relaxing slightly, letting the tension ease from her shoulders. "It is very beautiful," she said after a while. "I think so too. Every morning when I step outside, I am grateful to be here." He glanced at her. "I want you to know, Miss Turner, that I will do my best to be a good husband to you. I know this arrangement is unusual, that we are essentially strangers, but I am hoping we can build something real together. A partnership, maybe even more in time." Her throat tightened. "I will do my best as well. I can cook and clean, and so I will work hard." "I am sure you will. But I want you to know that I am not looking for just a housekeeper. I am hoping for a companion, someone to share this life with." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I will not rush you into anything. We can take our time getting to know each other. I had the reverend in town draw up the marriage papers, but we do not have to sign them right away if you would prefer to wait." This surprised her. Most men in his position would have insisted on immediate marriage. "That is very considerate. I want you to feel comfortable here, safe." Something in the way he said that last word made her look at him more closely, but his expression was open and honest. They rode in silence for a while longer, and Delilah found her eyes growing heavy. The rocking of the wagon and the warmth of the sun combined with weeks of poor sleep finally caught up with her. She tried to fight it, but exhaustion won. She woke to the feeling of the wagon stopping and Nate's gentle voice. "We are here." Blinking, she sat up straighter and looked around. The ranch house stood before them, a sturdy wooden structure with a covered porch and shuttered windows. It was simple but well built, exactly as he had described. Behind it, she could see a barn and several other outbuildings. 3 horses grazed in a nearby corral, and in the distance, she spotted cattle dotting the hillside. "It is wonderful," she said, and meant it. Nate helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The interior was neat and clean, with simple furniture and curtains on the windows. The main room had a stone fireplace, a table with 4 chairs, and a comfortable-looking sofa. To the left was a small kitchen with a cast-iron stove. 2 doors led to what must be the bedrooms. "The larger bedroom is yours," Nate said, setting her trunk down. "I will take the smaller one." "Like I said, no rush on anything." She looked at him in surprise. "But this is your home. And now it is yours too. You have had a long journey. Why do you not rest for a while? I need to check on the cattle, but I will be back before supper. There is food in the kitchen if you get hungry before then." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and headed back outside. Through the window, she watched him unhitch the horses and lead them to the barn. Then he saddled a different horse and rode off toward the hills. Alone in the house, Delilah finally allowed herself to truly look around. Everything was clean and organized. The bedroom he had given her had a large bed with a quilt, a dresser, and a washstand with a basin and pitcher. The window looked out over the rolling hills. She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 other dresses in the wardrobe and placing her few personal items on the dresser. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped carefully in cloth, was her mother's Bible and a small wooden box containing her mother's wedding ring and a few letters. As she lifted the cloth-wrapped Bible, her dress pulled tight across her shoulders, and she winced. The scars on her back, though mostly healed, still hurt when she moved certain ways. She thought of the man who had put them there, her former employer at the dress shop, Mr. Harrison. He had seemed kind at first, offering her extra work, telling her she had talent. But his kindness had been a mask. The first time he hit her was when she refused his advances. The second time was when she threatened to tell his wife. By the 5th time, she had learned to be silent, to endure, to survive. The scars came from the last time, when he had used his belt, angry that she wanted to leave his employment. She had finally escaped, stealing away in the night with her few possessions, and had hidden in the boarding house for weeks until she saw the advertisement for a mail-order bride. She pushed the memories away and carefully removed her dress. In the mirror on the dresser, she could see the edges of the scars extending past her chemise. They were pink and raised, crossing her back in several places. They would fade more with time, the doctor had told her, but they would never fully disappear. Delilah washed her face and hands in the basin, then changed into a fresh dress. She was braiding her hair when she heard horses outside. Looking through the window, she saw Nate returning with 2 other men. They dismounted near the barn, talking and gesturing toward the hills. After a few minutes, the other men rode off and Nate came toward the house. She met him at the door. "Everything all right?" "Yes, just some fence that needs mending. Nothing urgent." He removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door. "How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you." "The room is lovely." "I am glad." He moved to the kitchen. "I am not much of a cook, I will admit. Usually I just make simple things, but I thought tonight, since it is your first night here, we could do better. I have some chicken I could fry, and there are potatoes and green beans from the garden." "Let me do that," she said quickly. "Please. You have been working all day." He looked like he might argue, then nodded. "All right, but let me at least help." They worked together in the kitchen, and Delilah found herself relaxing further. Nate was easy to be around, not demanding or overbearing. He told her stories about the ranch, about his 2 ranch hands, Marcus and Joe, who she had seen briefly outside. He explained about the cattle business, about the challenges of drought and the hopes for good prices at market. She told him small things about Philadelphia, about the dress shop and the ladies who came in with their elaborate orders. She told him about learning to sew from her mother, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from fabric and thread. They ate at the table as the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. After dinner, they sat on the porch and watched the stars emerge, bright and numerous in the dark Texas sky. "I have never seen so many stars," Delilah said softly. "One of my favorite things about being out here, it is like the whole universe is on display." He was quiet for a moment. "Miss Turner, I want to ask you something, and please feel free to say no. Would you be comfortable if we went ahead and got married soon? Not tonight or anything, but maybe in the next few days. It is just that, well, people in town will talk if we are living here together unwed, and I do not want your reputation damaged." She had known this was coming. "Yes, that would be fine. I understand. We could go into town the day after tomorrow. The Reverend could perform the ceremony. It does not have to be anything fancy." "That sounds appropriate." Her heart was beating fast again, but not entirely from fear. Nate had been nothing but kind and respectful. Perhaps this could work. Perhaps she could build a new life here. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Delilah stared at the ceiling and thought about the turn her life had taken. Just months ago, she had been trapped in a nightmare, enduring abuse and seeing no way out. Now she was in Texas, about to marry a stranger, but a stranger who seemed genuinely good. She touched her back gently, feeling the ridges of scar tissue through her nightgown. Would Nate expect his marital rights immediately after the wedding? The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety. She would have to tell him eventually. She could not hide the scars forever if they were to be truly married. The next day passed in a blur of activity. Delilah threw herself into making the house more of a home. She cleaned thoroughly, though everything was already quite neat. She reorganized the kitchen to her liking. She mended some shirts she found that needed repair. Nate was in and out, working with his ranch hands, but he checked on her regularly. That evening, as they sat down to supper, he said, "I sent word to Reverend Matthews that we will come tomorrow afternoon. Is that still all right with you?" "Yes." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Delilah." It was the first time he had used her first name. "If you are having second thoughts, if you want more time, please tell me. I will not be angry." She looked at him across the table. His face was open, honest, concerned. "I am not having second thoughts. I am just nervous, which I suppose is natural." "I am nervous too," he admitted with a slight smile. "I have never been married before, never even came close. I am not entirely sure I will be good at it." This made her smile despite her anxiety. "I suppose we will figure it out together." The next morning, Delilah put on her best dress, a green cotton one with small white flowers. It was not fancy, but it was clean and pressed. She arranged her hair carefully, pinning it up in a style her mother had taught her. Looking at herself in the mirror, she saw a woman trying to look brave. Nate had dressed in his best clothes as well, a clean shirt and vest, with his hair neatly combed. He helped her into the wagon, and they made the hour-long journey into Dallas mostly in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The church was a small white building with a steeple, located on a side street. Reverend Matthews was a kind-faced man in his 50s who greeted them warmly. They would need witnesses, he explained, and sent for the shopkeeper next door and his wife. The ceremony was brief and simple. Delilah spoke her vows in a clear voice, and Nate's hand was steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Nate leaned in and kissed her cheek gently, respectfully. They signed the papers, thanked the Reverend and the witnesses, and stepped back out into the bright afternoon. Delilah looked down at the ring on her finger, this tangible symbol of the commitment she had just made. "Would you like to stop at the hotel for a meal before we head back?" Nate asked. "Yes, that would be nice." At the hotel dining room, several people recognized Nate and came over to offer congratulations. Delilah found herself introduced as Mrs. Wells over and over, the title still strange to her ears. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, and she began to feel like perhaps she could belong here. On the ride back to the ranch, the tension in the wagon was palpable. Both of them knew that something had fundamentally shifted. They were married now, legally bound together. When they arrived home, Nate helped her down from the wagon and then stood there awkwardly for a moment. "Delilah, I want you to know that nothing has to change tonight, or any night until you are ready. The sleeping arrangements can stay as they are." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I know this is all very strange and new. I just want you to feel comfortable." He paused. "I am going to check on the horses. I will be back in a bit." Delilah went inside and changed out of her good dress. She started preparing supper, her hands moving automatically through familiar tasks while her mind whirled. She was married. She was someone's wife. Mrs. Delilah Wells. Over the following days, they settled into a routine. Nate worked the ranch during the day, and Delilah managed the household. She cooked, cleaned, tended the small vegetable garden behind the house, and mended clothes. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch or by the fireplace if the night was cool, talking about their days. Slowly, Delilah began to relax. Nate never pushed her, never demanded anything she was not ready to give. He was patient and kind, and she found herself looking forward to their evening conversations. He had a dry sense of humor that surprised her into laughter, and he listened when she talked, really listened, as though her thoughts and opinions mattered. One evening, about 2 weeks after their marriage, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Nate said, "I need to go into town tomorrow to pick up some supplies. Would you like to come with me? You could visit the dress shop if you like, or the mercantile. I thought you might enjoy getting out a bit." "I would like that," she said. It had been 2 weeks since she had seen anything beyond the ranch, and while she loved the peace and beauty of it, a trip to town sounded appealing. The next morning they set out early. The ride into Dallas was pleasant, with Nate pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area. When they arrived, he helped her down in front of the mercantile. "Take your time looking around. I will be at the feed store and then the blacksmith. Shall we meet back here in about 2 hours? "That sounds perfect." Delilah spent a lovely hour browsing the mercantile, admiring the fabrics and notions. She carefully selected thread and needles as her supply was running low. She also found a beautiful piece of blue fabric that would make a nice shirt for Nate. As she was leaving the mercantile, carrying her small parcels, she nearly collided with a well-dressed woman about her own age. "Oh, I am so sorry," Delilah said quickly. "No harm done," the woman said with a warm smile. "You must be Mrs. Wells, Nathan's new bride. I am Sarah Jenkins. My husband owns the bank. It is nice to meet you. Welcome to Dallas. We were all so happy when we heard Nathan had married. He is a good man, works very hard on that ranch of his." Sarah fell into step beside her as they walked down the boardwalk. "You must come to church this Sunday. Several of us ladies have been wanting to meet you properly. Perhaps you could join us for tea one afternoon." The kindness was almost overwhelming. "I would like that very much, thank you." They talked for a few more minutes before Sarah had to go, but the encounter left Delilah feeling lighter. People here were friendly and accepting. She was building a new life, making a fresh start, just as she had hoped. She found Nate waiting by the wagon, loading sacks of feed into the back. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made something flutter in her chest. "Did you have a nice time?" "Yes, very nice. I met Mrs. Jenkins from the bank. Sarah is good people. Her husband Tom is a fair man." He helped her into the wagon. "I thought we might have lunch at the hotel before heading back, if you are not in a hurry." During lunch, Delilah found herself studying Nate's face as he talked about some repairs needed on the barn. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped being a stranger. She knew the way he liked his coffee, the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was tired, the sound of his laugh. She knew he was scrupulously honest, that he treated his ranch hands with respect and paid them fairly, that he was patient with the horses and gentle with the cattle. She also knew that her feelings for him were deepening into something more than gratitude or respect. When he smiled at her, she felt warm. When he accidentally brushed against her in the kitchen, she felt a spark. She was beginning to care for him, and the realization was both thrilling and terrifying. That night, after supper, they sat on the porch as usual. The air was cool, and Nate draped a blanket around Delilah's shoulders without her having to ask. The gesture, small as it was, touched her deeply. "Nate," she said softly, "I want to thank you." "For what?" for being patient with me, for being kind, for giving me time." She turned to look at him. "I know this arrangement must be frustrating for you sometimes." He met her eyes steadily. "It is not frustrating. I told you I want you to be comfortable. I want you to be happy here. I am happy here." The words came out more intensely than she had intended. "Happier than I have been in a long time." Something shifted in his expression. "I am glad, very glad." He hesitated, then reached over and gently took her hand. "Delilah, I need you to know something. I care about you, not just as my wife on paper, but truly care about you. Your happiness matters to me. Your well-being matters to me." Her throat tightened with emotion. "I care about you too." They sat there holding hands, watching the stars emerge, and Delilah felt something inside her begin to heal. This man, this kind and patient man, had given her something she thought she had lost forever: the ability to trust. But she knew she could not move forward completely until she told him the truth. He deserved to know what had happened to her, why she had been so afraid, why she still sometimes flinched at sudden movements. "Nate, there is something I need to tell you, about why I came here, about my past." Her voice shook slightly. He squeezed her hand. "You can tell me anything or nothing if you prefer, whatever you are comfortable with." "No, I need to tell you. It is not fair to you otherwise." She took a deep breath. "I told you I worked at a dress shop in Philadelphia. That was true. What I did not tell you was that the owner, Mr. Harrison, he was not a good man." She felt Nate tense slightly beside her, but he did not interrupt. "At first, everything was fine. I was a good seamstress and he gave me work. But then he started paying too much attention to me, making comments, standing too close. I tried to avoid him, but it got worse." The words were coming faster now, like water through a broken dam. "He made advances, and when I refused, he got angry. He hit me. More than once." Nate's hand tightened on hers, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. "I am so sorry that happened to you. The last time it was bad. I had told him I was leaving, that I had found other work. He flew into a rage and used his belt on me, on my back." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He left scars, physical ones that will never fully go away." For a long moment, Nate said nothing. Then he shifted on the bench to face her fully. "Look at me, Delilah." She forced herself to meet his eyes, expecting to see pity or disgust. Instead, she saw fury, but not directed at her. His jaw was tight and his eyes blazed with anger. "That man had no right to hurt you, no right at all. What he did was evil and wrong." His voice was fierce but controlled. "And I want you to know something, and I want you to believe me. No one will hurt you again, not while I am alive. I swear to you, on everything I hold sacred, no one will ever hurt you again." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was so afraid to tell you. I thought you might send me back or think less of me." "Never." He reached up and gently wiped her tears with his thumb. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. You are brave and strong, and I am honored that you trusted me enough to tell me this." He paused. "Is that why you have been so careful around me? Why you flinch sometimes?" She nodded, unable to speak. "I understand now. And I want you to know that I will never, ever raise a hand to you in anger. I would rather cut off my own arm. You are safe here, Delilah, truly safe." She believed him. Looking into his eyes, hearing the conviction in his voice, she believed him completely. Fresh tears came, but these were tears of relief. Nate pulled her gently into his arms, and she let herself lean against him, feeling his strength and warmth. He held her carefully, as though she were precious, and she felt something crack open inside her chest. They sat like that for a long time, her head on his shoulder, his arms around her. Finally, when her tears had stopped, she pulled back slightly and looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered. "You never have to thank me for treating you with basic human decency and respect." His voice was still fierce. "That should be the bare minimum you can expect." They went inside eventually, and when they parted for their separate bedrooms, Nate paused at his door. "If you need anything, anything at all, I am right here. You are not alone anymore." That night, Delilah slept better than she had in months. The weight of carrying her secret alone had been lifted, and Nate's promise echoed in her mind. "No one will hurt you again." Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to deepen. Nate continued to be patient and respectful, but now there was a new understanding between them. Sometimes, Delilah would catch him looking at her with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. Sometimes, when they were working side by side in the kitchen or sitting close on the porch, their eyes would meet and hold, and the air between them would crackle with unspoken feeling. One afternoon, Delilah was in the vegetable garden behind the house when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. Her heart leaped in fear, old instincts kicking in. She hurried toward the sound, her hands clenched in her apron. As she rounded the corner of the barn, she saw Nate and one of his ranch hands, Marcus, having what looked like a heated discussion. For a moment, pure panic seized her. Then she saw that neither man was angry or threatening. They were just talking loudly over the sound of a hammer striking metal. Nate looked up and saw her standing there, pale and frightened. His expression immediately softened, and he said something to Marcus before walking over to her. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I heard shouting." "I thought," she stopped, embarrassed. Understanding crossed his face. "We were just discussing the best way to fix the corral fence. Marcus has some strong opinions." He smiled gently. "Everything is fine. I am sorry we frightened you," she nodded, feeling foolish. "I should get back to the garden," but Nate caught her hand. "Wait. I want to show you something." He led her around the barn to where Marcus was working. "Marcus, this is my wife, Delilah. Delilah, this is Marcus Reed. He has worked for me for 2 years now and is the best hand with horses I have ever seen." Marcus, a man in his 30s with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes, tipped his hat. "Pleased to meet you properly, madam. I have heard good things." Nate pointed to a stall in the barn. "Come look at this." Inside the stall was a beautiful chestnut mare with a white blaze on her forehead. She was smaller than the ranch horses, with a gentle eye and delicate features. "She is yours if you want her," Nate said. "I bought her last week in town. Her name is Rosie. She is gentle and well-trained. I thought you might like to be able to ride around the property, maybe come with me sometimes when I check the cattle." Delilah stared at the horse, then at Nate. "You bought me a horse." "Well, a ranch wife should have her own horse." He looked suddenly uncertain. "Unless you do not like her or do not want to ride." I just thought. She threw her arms around him, cutting off his words. "Thank you. I love her." He hugged her back, and for a moment they just stood there holding each other. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Over the next week, Nate taught her to ride Rosie. Delilah had ridden as a child but was rusty, and the gentle mare was perfect for rebuilding her confidence. They would ride out together in the evenings, exploring the property, and Nate would point out the boundaries of the ranch, the best grazing areas, the places where wildflowers grew thick in spring. One evening, they rode to the top of a hill that overlooked the entire valley. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold and amber light. They dismounted and stood there side by side, looking out over the land. "I love it here," Delilah said softly. "I never imagined I could feel this way about a place." "What way?" "Safe, free, like I belong." She turned to look at him. "You gave me that. You gave me a home. You gave me something too." His voice was low and intense. "For years this ranch was just work, just something to keep me busy, to prove I could make something of myself. But now, when I ride up to the house at the end of the day and see the light in the window, knowing you are there, it feels like more. It feels like home." They stood close, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. The air between them was charged, electric. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Nate cupped her face with his hand. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Really kiss you?" Instead of answering, Delilah rose on her tiptoes and closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but then it deepened. His arms came around her waist, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, and for a long moment they were lost in each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Nate rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I have been falling in love with you since the day you arrived, and I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I love you, Delilah." Joy burst through her chest like sunlight. "I love you too. I did not think I could feel this way, did not think I would ever trust anyone enough, but I love you, Nate." They kissed again, longer this time, and when they finally pulled apart, the sun had set completely, leaving them in twilight. They rode back to the ranch house slowly, hands occasionally reaching across to touch, to reassure, to connect. When they arrived, Nate helped her down from Rosie, his hands lingering on her waist. Inside the house, they stood in the main room, suddenly shy with each other again. The declarations of love had changed everything, opened a door that could not be closed. "Delilah," Nate said carefully, "I want you to know that I still do not expect anything from you. Just because we said those words does not mean you are obligated to anything you are not ready for." She looked at him, this man who had shown her such patience and kindness, who had promised no one would hurt her again, who had given her freedom and safety and love. She was still frightened, still scarred both physically and emotionally, but she was also ready to truly move forward. "I want to be your wife," she said quietly. "In every way I am ready. Are you certain? We can wait as long as you need." "I am certain." She reached up and touched his face. "I trust you, I love you, I am ready." That night they became husband and wife in truth. Nate was gentle and patient, careful of her scars and her fears. When he saw her back for the first time, saw the marks that crossed her skin, his jaw tightened with renewed anger at the man who had hurt her. But he leaned down and kissed each scar softly, tenderly, as though he could heal them with touch. "You are beautiful," he whispered against her skin. "These scars do not define you. They are just proof that you survived, that you are strong enough to endure and brave enough to start over." Afterward they lay tangled together in the bed, her head on his chest, his arms around her. Delilah felt a completeness she had never known before. She was loved, she was cherished, she was safe. "No regrets?" Nate asked softly, his fingers trailing through her hair. "None. You." "Only that I did not find you sooner." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and when Delilah woke in the morning to sunlight streaming through the window and Nate's arms still around her, she smiled. This was her life now. This man, this home, this love. The weeks turned into months, and their love continued to grow. They worked side by side during the day, Delilah managing the household and even helping with some of the ranch work, Nate teaching her about cattle and horses and the rhythms of ranch life. At night, they would fall into bed together, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Delilah began to blossom. The haunted look faded from her eyes, replaced by peace and joy. She laughed more easily, smiled more often. She made friends in town, joining the church ladies for tea, helping with community events. She became known as a skilled seamstress, and women began bringing her fabric to make dresses and shirts. Nate, too, seemed happier. The loneliness that had shadowed him was gone. His ranch hands noticed the change in him, the way he smiled more, the spring in his step. His ranch prospered, partly because he was a good rancher, but partly because he now had a true partner helping him make decisions and manage the business. One evening in early fall, about 6 months after Delilah had arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when she turned to him with news she had been holding close all day. "Nate, I need to tell you something." He looked at her, catching the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" "I am with child. I saw the doctor in town today to be certain, and he confirmed it. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Nate just stared at her. Then a grin spread across his face, so wide and joyful that it transformed him. "Truly, truly." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. "I did not think I could be any happier than I already was, but I was wrong. This is the best news I have ever received." They talked late into the night about the future, about names and plans, about expanding the house to make room for the baby. Nate was attentive to her every need, insisting she not work too hard, making sure she rested. As winter approached, Delilah's belly began to swell. Nate was fascinated by the changes in her body, gently touching the growing bump, talking to the baby through her skin. He built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Delilah sewed tiny clothes and blankets. The community rallied around them. Sarah Jenkins organized a gathering for the women to bring gifts for the baby. Marcus and Joe, the ranch hands, built an addition onto the house, creating a nursery adjacent to the master bedroom. One evening in late winter, when Delilah was about 7 months along, they were sitting by the fire when she said, "I need to tell you something else." Nate looked up from the piece of leather he was working on, making a tiny pair of baby boots. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about Philadelphia, about what happened there. And I realized that I am not afraid anymore. Not of the memories, not of the past. You have given me a new life, a better life, and I do not want to carry that fear with me anymore. You have every right to those feelings to take as long as you need to heal. I know, but I think I have healed as much as I ever will. The scars are still there, but they do not hurt anymore, and I think that is because of you, because of how you love me." She paused. "I want our child to grow up knowing only love and safety. I want to be strong for them, the way you have been strong for me." He set aside the tiny boots and pulled her close, or as close as her belly would allow. "You are the strongest person I know. And our child is going to be so lucky to have you as a mother." In early spring, as the wildflowers Nate had told her about began to bloom across the hills, Delilah went into labor. It was long and difficult, but Nate was by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. Finally, as dawn broke over the Texas hills, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry, his face red and angry, his tiny fists waving. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing him on Delilah's chest. "A strong, healthy boy." Delilah looked down at her son, at his perfect tiny features, and felt a love so fierce it nearly overwhelmed her. Nate was beside her, his arm around her shoulders, looking at their child with wonder and awe. "He is perfect," Nate whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Nate said, "How about James, after your father?" Fresh tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks. She had told Nate stories about her father, a kind and gentle man who had died when she was 18. "James Wells. That is perfect." Little James Wells was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had Nate's dark hair and Delilah's green eyes, and both parents were utterly besotted with him. The ranch hands would stop by to admire the baby, and the community welcomed him with gifts and well wishes. As Delilah recovered from childbirth, Nate took over even more of the household duties, insisting she rest and focus on the baby. He would bring James to her for feeding, then walk him around the house when he was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice. One afternoon, when James was about 2 months old, Delilah stood at the window watching Nate outside. He had James in a sling against his chest, the baby sleeping peacefully while Nate checked on the horses. The sight filled her with such love and contentment that she had to blink back tears. Sarah Jenkins, who had stopped by with a basket of food, came to stand beside her. "You have a good man there. I know, I am very lucky. Luck has nothing to do with it. You both chose each other and you both choose each other every day. That is love, real love." Sarah patted her arm. "I remember when Nathan first came to Dallas. He was so serious, so focused on building his ranch. Some folks thought he would be a bachelor forever, but I always thought he just needed the right woman, and you are definitely the right woman." After Sarah left, Delilah thought about her words. She had chosen Nate, initially out of desperation, but every day since then she had chosen him again. She had chosen to trust him, to love him, to build a life with him. And he had chosen her right back with patience and kindness and unwavering devotion. The months passed, turning into years. Little James grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy. He had his father's love of horses and his mother's quick smile. 2 years after James was born, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, and 3 years after that, another son they named Thomas. The ranch prospered under Nate's careful management. He expanded the cattle herd, bought more land, and built a larger barn. Delilah's sewing business grew as well, and she became known throughout the county for her beautiful work. They built additions onto the house as the family grew, eventually creating a sprawling ranch house with 6 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a spacious sitting room. The children grew up healthy and happy, surrounded by love and the beauty of the Texas landscape. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nate surprised Delilah with a trip into Dallas, just the two of them. His mother had come from Kansas to watch the children for the weekend, and Nate had booked a room at the Dallas Grand Hotel. They had dinner in the hotel dining room, the same place where they had eaten on their wedding day. Afterward, they walked through the town, hand in hand, talking and laughing. "You ever think about that first day?" Nate asked. "When you stepped off the stagecoach?" "Sometimes. I was so frightened, I had no idea what I was walking into. I was nervous too. I kept thinking, what if she does not like the ranch? What if she wants to go back to Philadelphia? What if I cannot make her happy?" Delilah laughed. "And now look at us. 3 children, a thriving ranch, and more happiness than I ever dreamed possible." Back in their hotel room, Nate pulled her close. "I want you to know something. These have been the best 10 years of my life. Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard days. The drought year when we almost lost the herd, the winter when Emma was so sick, even those days, because we faced them together." He kissed her softly. "I love you more now than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you more 10 years from now than I do today. That is my promise to you." "I love you too. You saved me, Nate, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "You gave my life meaning, purpose. You turned a house into a home, a ranch into a family legacy." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies and hearts completely. And in the morning, they woke early and rode back to the ranch, eager to be reunited with their children. The years continued to pass. The children grew up strong and healthy. James showed an aptitude for ranching and began working alongside his father as soon as he was old enough. Emma inherited her mother's skill with needle and thread, and her father's business sense. Thomas was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book, talking about becoming a lawyer someday. Delilah's scars faded more with time, becoming thin white lines that she barely noticed anymore. She rarely thought about Philadelphia or the man who had hurt her. That life seemed like a distant nightmare, something that had happened to a different person. One evening, when James was 20 and courting a girl from town, Emma was 17 and helping run Delilah's sewing business, and Thomas was 15 and studying for his entrance exams to university. Nate and Delilah sat on the porch together, as they had done countless times over the years. "Do you remember the first time we sat here?" Delilah asked. "The night I told you about my past. I remember. I remember wanting to hunt down that man who hurt you and make him pay for what he did." "I know you did. But the best revenge was building this life, being happy, raising our children in love and safety. That is what defeated him, not violence." Nate pulled her close. "You are right, as always. I am just grateful that you took a chance on a lonely rancher with a small ranch and big dreams. I am grateful you took a chance on a broken woman with scars and secrets. You were never broken. You were wounded, but you were never broken. Your spirit, your strength, your capacity for love, those were always intact. I saw that from the first day." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. In the distance, they could see their children, James and Emma riding horses near the creek, Thomas sitting under a tree with a book. "We did well, did we not?" Delilah said softly. "We did better than well. We built something beautiful." More years passed. James married his sweetheart, a kind girl named Lucy, and they gave Nate and Delilah their first grandchild, a little girl named Delilah after her grandmother. Emma married a banker's son from Dallas and continued to run a successful dressmaking business. Thomas went off to law school in Austin and returned to open a practice in Dallas, quickly gaining a reputation as a fierce defender of justice. Nate and Delilah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminishing. They spent their days working the ranch together, though James had taken over most of the heavy work. They spent their evenings on the porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the county. Tables were set up under the oak trees, laden with food. Music played and people danced in the yard. At one point, Nate stood up to make a speech. 30 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride. I was lonely and desperate for companionship, and I had almost given up hope of finding someone willing to share this rough life with me. Then Delilah stepped off that stagecoach, and my entire world changed." He looked at her, his eyes still full of love after all these years. "She was brave enough to travel 2,000 miles to start a new life with a stranger. She was strong enough to trust again after being hurt. She was patient enough to let me fumble my way through being a husband. And she has blessed me with 30 years of love, 3 incredible children, and 7 amazing grandchildren so far." Everyone applauded, and Delilah wiped tears from her eyes. Then it was her turn. She stood up a bit unsteadily, and Nate immediately took her hand to support her. "When I came to Texas, I was running away from pain and looking for safety. What I found was so much more than that. I found a home. I found a family. I found a man who taught me that love does not have to hurt, that strength can be gentle, that trust can be rebuilt." She looked around at all the faces watching her, people who had become dear friends over the years. "I found a community that welcomed me and made me one of their own. And I found myself again, the person I was meant to be all along." She turned to Nate. "You once promised me that no one would hurt me again, and you have kept that promise every single day of our marriage. You have protected me, cherished me, and loved me through everything. You are the best man I have ever known, and I am grateful every day that I took a chance on that advertisement." They kissed while everyone cheered, and then the celebration continued long into the night. As they lay in bed that evening, exhausted but happy, Nate pulled Delilah close. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Truly happy, more than I ever imagined possible. Are you beyond measure?" He kissed her forehead. "When I think about that frightened woman who stepped off the stagecoach 30 years ago, and I look at the confident, strong woman beside me now, I am just in awe of you. You have grown and flourished, and it has been the honor of my life to witness it. I could not have done it without you. You gave me the space to heal, the security to grow, and the love to thrive." They fell asleep in each other's arms, just as they had done thousands of times before. Several more years passed peacefully. The grandchildren grew, and more were added to the family. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management. Emma's dressmaking business expanded to include 3 assistants. Thomas became a respected lawyer, known for taking cases others would not, defending those who could not afford expensive representation. Nate's health began to decline when he was in his late 60s. Nothing serious, just the natural slowing down of age. He still rode every day, though not as far or as fast as he once had. He still worked on the ranch, though James did most of the heavy lifting now. One afternoon, Delilah found him sitting in the barn just looking at the horses. She sat down beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how lucky I have been. About how I got to spend my life doing work I loved in a place I loved with the woman I loved. Not many men can say that. You made your own luck. You worked hard, you treated people fairly, and you built something lasting." He turned to her. "I could not have done any of it without you. You know that, right? You were not just my wife, you were my partner in everything." "I know." "And you were mine." They sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after decades of shared life. Then Nate said, "I want you to promise me something, anything. When I am gone, do not waste time grieving too much. I want you to enjoy whatever time you have left. Spend it with the children and grandchildren. Keep riding Rosie. Keep sewing. Keep living." "You are not going anywhere for a long time," she said firmly, even though she knew he was right to think about the future. "Maybe not, but eventually. And I want you to know that every single day I have had with you has been a blessing. I have no regrets, no wishes for things to be different. My life has been perfect because you were in it." Tears streamed down her face. "My life has been perfect because of you too. You took a broken, frightened woman and loved her back to wholeness. You gave me everything I ever needed, and things I did not even know I wanted." They held each other in the quiet barn, surrounded by the familiar smells of hay and horses, the sounds of the ranch going on around them. And they were content. Nate lived another 5 years, healthy and active until nearly the end. He died peacefully one night in his sleep, with Delilah beside him at the age of 72. The funeral was huge, with people coming from all over the county and beyond to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved by so many. Delilah grieved, but she also kept her promise. She continued to live fully, spending time with her children and grandchildren, teaching the girls to sew, telling stories about their grandfather to the younger ones who had not known him as well. She rode Rosie every day until the old mare passed away peacefully at the age of 32. Then she got a new horse and kept riding. She lived another 12 years, remaining sharp and active until the end. Her children and grandchildren were constantly at the ranch, drawn by her stories, her wisdom, and the love that seemed to radiate from her. On a beautiful spring day, surrounded by wildflowers, Delilah Turner Wells passed away quietly at the age of 84. Her last words were, "Tell Nate I am coming home." They buried her next to Nate on the hill overlooking the valley, the same hill where they had first kissed all those years ago. The entire community came to the funeral, filling the church and spilling out into the yard. Speaker after speaker stood up to talk about how Delilah had touched their lives, how she had been kind and generous, how she had been a pillar of the community. James stood at the graveside and spoke for all the children. Our mother was an extraordinary woman. She came from nothing, from a place of pain and fear, and she built a life of love and joy. She taught us by example that the past does not define us, that we can overcome anything, that love is the strongest force in the world. She and our father built something beautiful together, a legacy that will continue through all of us and our children and their children. As the sun set over the valley, the family lingered at the graveside. Little Delilah, now a woman of 30 with children of her own, placed wildflowers on both graves. "Thank you, grandmother, for teaching me to be strong. Thank you, grandfather, for showing me what a good man looks like." The ranch continued under James's management and eventually passed to his children. The family stayed close, gathering regularly at the ranch for holidays and celebrations. The story of Nate and Delilah, of how they found each other against all odds and built a life of love and purpose, was passed down through the generations. Emma's daughters and granddaughters continued the sewing business, which became a dress shop in Dallas that lasted for over 100 years. Thomas's children and grandchildren carried on his legacy of fighting for justice, producing lawyers and judges who made a difference in the world. The little house that Nate had built with his own hands was eventually expanded and modernized, but the original structure remained at its heart. The porch where Nate and Delilah had spent so many evenings was preserved, and family members would often sit there, feeling the presence of their ancestors in the warm Texas breeze. Years later, one of the great-great-grandchildren, a history student, did research into the family and discovered Delilah's original advertisement response letter in a box of family papers. The letter was simple and brief, giving no hint of the trauma she was fleeing or the fear she was carrying. But between the careful words, you could sense her desperate hope for a better life. The history student also found Nate's journal, which he had kept sporadically throughout his life. In it were entries about meeting Delilah for the first time, about their courtship, about the night she told him about her past. One entry, dated 2 weeks after their wedding, simply said, "I think I am falling in love with my wife. She is stronger than she knows, braver than she believes. I will spend the rest of my life proving to her that she deserves to be loved." Another entry, years later, said, "Watch Delilah with the children today. She is so patient and loving with them. Sometimes I think about the fact that she almost did not come here, almost did not take a chance on me, and my blood runs cold. What would my life have been without her? Empty, meaningless. She is everything." The last entry in the journal, written just weeks before his death, said, 50 years together. 50 years of waking up beside her, of building a life together, of facing challenges and celebrating victories. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Except maybe I would find her sooner so we could have more time, but I am grateful for every moment we have had. She was worth the wait. She was worth everything. The family papers were eventually donated to the local historical society, where they became part of an exhibit on frontier life and mail-order brides. Nate and Delilah's story became a local legend, an example of how love could heal, how trust could be rebuilt, how two broken people could come together and create something beautiful. The ranch itself was eventually donated to the state and became a historical site, preserving not just the buildings but the story of the family who had lived there. Visitors could walk through the house, see the cradle Nate had made for baby James, see the sewing machine where Delilah had created her beautiful work, sit on the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. But more than the physical legacy, Nate and Delilah left behind something intangible but precious. They had shown that love could conquer fear, that kindness could heal wounds, that patience could rebuild trust. They had shown that a marriage born out of desperation and necessity could become something profound and lasting. They had shown that happy endings were possible, even for those who started with nothing but hope. Their descendants carried their values forward, treating people with respect, working hard, building communities, and loving fiercely. The family tree grew and branched, spreading across Texas and eventually across the country. But the roots remained in that ranch in Dallas, in the love story of a frightened mail-order bride and the patient cowboy who had promised no one would hurt her again, and had spent his life keeping that promise. And on certain spring evenings, when the wildflowers bloomed across the hills, and the sun set in shades of gold and amber, visitors to the ranch swore they could feel something in the air, a sense of peace and love so strong it was almost tangible. Some said it was the ghosts of Nate and Delilah, still watching over the land they loved. Others said it was just the wind or imagination. But those who knew the story, who understood the depth of what had been built there, knew better. It was not ghosts but legacy, not haunting but blessing. It was the echo of a love so strong it had transcended time, a reminder that even in the roughest circumstances, even starting from the deepest wounds, it was possible to build something beautiful and lasting. The story of Delilah Turner and Nathan Wells lived on, passed down through generations, adapted and embellished but always containing the essential truth, that love, real love built on respect and trust and patience, could heal anything, that no one was too broken to be made whole, that happy endings were not just for fairy tales, but for real people who were brave enough to take chances and strong enough to be vulnerable. And every time someone stood on that hill overlooking the valley, looking out at the land that Nate and Delilah had built together, they understood that this was more than just a ranch or a house or a piece of history. It was a testament to the power of love, to the possibility of redemption, to the promise that no matter how dark the past, the future could be bright. The wildflowers continued to bloom every spring, covering the hills in color, and the creek continued to flow through the property, and the ranch continued to stand strong against the Texas wind. And somewhere, in whatever place exists beyond this life, Nate and Delilah stood together, hand in hand, watching over the legacy they had created and knowing that their love had made a difference that would last forever.